marker squeaked. Not because someone wrote with it, but because someone dared to pick it up. A black woman in a faded gray janitor's uniform stood at the edge of a conference room that wasn't meant for her. Fluorescent lights hummed above. Around the giant oval table sat 20 suits, 4 screens, one assistant clutching an iPad, and one CEO staring straight through her. The whiteboard behind the suits was covered in colorful equations, arrows, and buzzwords like agile pivot and predictive failure points. And at the very center of it all, a bold underlined phrase in red that read, "No viable fix." Janet didn't mean to be here. She was on her last round of the 23rd floor. She had just wiped the coffee ring off the windowsill when she noticed a tray of untouched sandwiches outside Conference 4B. She was going to return them to catering when she heard someone say, "And we've checked every predictive model. If it fails, it fails. The market's going to eat us alive." Janet froze. Not because she cared about markets, because she recognized something on the screen. Something she had once worked on, years ago before things changed. She leaned a little closer. She stared at the numbers, then at the whiteboard, and then she stepped into the room. No one noticed at first. They were arguing. It wasn't until she reached for the marker that silence hit like a slap. A man near the door scoffed. Another whispered, "Who let the cleaning staff in here?" And still Janet held the marker. One foot on the carpet, one on the tile. "You're going to want to look at this," she said quietly. No one moved, but one person did blink. The CEO. Janet pointed to the red circle on the board. That equation's built on a false input. If your data came from the April batch, there's a misclassification in the sensor group. It's small, but it breaks your entire assumption. Silence, then laughter. Not loud, not cruel. Just dismissive. "Okay, thanks for the insight, miss. We'll let the engineers know. Would you mind waiting outside?" But Janet didn't move. Not this time. And if you want to see how one quiet voice flipped an entire boardroom, subscribe. You won't believe what happens next. Janet always clocked in at 6:01 p.m., never a minute late. She moved through the building like breath through lungs, silent, unnoticed, necessary. No one knew her name. Most didn't know she had a daughter. Some thought she was new, even though she'd been cleaning those same 28 floors for 8 years. It was always the same. Empty lobbies, elevator dings, fluorescent buzz. People in press suits passed her like she was glass. But that Thursday evening, something strange broke the pattern. A lunch tray, left behind. Still wrapped with a name tag on the side, "Melissa, Executive Assistant, Floor 24. Janet paused. Someone forgot their lunch. That happens sometimes. Normally she would toss it if it was too old, but this one was fresh, sealed. Someone still needed it. She picked it up and started toward the elevator. A small gesture, nothing heroic. Just kindness. Just decency. She got to floor 24. Lights still on in the conference room. She walked up to the glass doors with the tray in hand. And that's when it started. The security guard outside conference room 4B held up his hand like a traffic cop. "Sorry, ma'am. No access. Meeting in progress." Janet blinked. "I'm not here for the meeting. I think Melissa left her lunch." The man didn't even look at the tray. He looked at her uniform. "You'll have to leave that with reception." "It's got her name on it." "Ma'am, I said leave it." He didn't shout. He didn't need to. Janet looked past him through the glass. Melissa was inside, looking pale and stiff, scribbling notes while the CEO and 3 VPs argued over numbers. The same tray Melissa had ordered that morning. Janet remembered seeing her pick it up with a nervous smile. Janet raised the bag a little. The guard stepped in front of her, closer now. "You don't belong in there." 3 words. Cold, surgical. She stepped back. Not because she was scared, because she knew that tone. She'd heard it before, when she'd walked into a physics lecture hall as the only woman. When a nurse at the hospital asked if she was the help while she held her sick daughter's hand. When her old boss said, "We just don't think you're quite ready to present." Back then, she walked away, swallowed it, moved on. This time, she just placed the sandwich on the receptionist's desk. "Make sure she gets it," she said. The receptionist barely nodded. As Janet turned back toward the service elevator, she caught a glimpse of something on the projector screen through the glass. A flow diagram. No big deal, except she'd seen that exact same model before, years ago, in a different life, and one tiny label near the center. Sensor input, April batch. Made her stomach turn. She stopped walking. She stared at the screen, then looked around. No one saw her. No one cared. And yet, her pulse picked up. Because that April batch, it had a known flaw, a statistical misclassification that affected everything built on top of it. She remembered. She remembered because she helped build it. Before budget cuts, before they downsized the R&D team, before they replaced scientists with software. Janet walked slowly toward the glass again. Listened. "We've run every model twice," someone said. "It doesn't matter. The algorithm is trash if the data's wrong. We're running out of time. Launch is in 9 days." That's when she saw it. The mistake. Clear as day, and nobody else noticed. Janet looked down at her gloves, then back at the screen. She didn't know what she was thinking. She just walked forward, past the security guard, who was too busy looking at his phone to stop her. Through the conference room doors unlocked, into a sea of suits, sweat, and panic. No one noticed. Not until she stepped to the whiteboard. Not until she picked up the marker. Not until she spoke. The second Janet spoke, the room froze. It wasn't what she said. It was the fact that she said anything at all. She stood there, one hand still holding the marker, the other gesturing toward a set of variables boxed in red. "Your prediction model assumes uniformity in the April sensor batch, but there was a recall. It was quiet, internal. Only a few of us saw it." Silence. A VP with gray temples blinked, then chuckled nervously. "I'm sorry, who are you exactly?" "I used to be in systems engineering before." She stopped. Her voice shook just slightly. "Before I took this job." Laughter, soft but sharp, ricocheted around the table like a dropped coin. "Systems engineering," a man muttered under his breath, smirking. "Right, like we haven't had enough armchair analysts." Someone else raised a phone, took a picture, whispered something to their neighbor. They were amused, bored, ready to go back to their panic, but their panic, not hers. Janet looked down at her boots, scuffed, wet around the soles from the mop sink. She should have left, but something in her held still. "I'm not here to take anything," she said quietly. "I just saw the error, that's all." She capped the marker, set it down on the tray like it burned, then turned to leave. No one stopped her. She made it back to the service elevator before she heard the ding behind her. The security guard. "Ma'am, I need to escort you off the floor." Janet didn't fight it. She just nodded and followed him back down. The next morning, when she arrived for her shift, her badge didn't work. She scanned it 3 times before the screen flashed red. "Access denied. Contact supervisor." She walked around to the side door, knocked. Nothing. Then her supervisor, a tired-looking man with an oversized tablet and a too-tight vest, opened the back. "Hey, Janet. Yeah, you're not scheduled today." "I'm always scheduled today." He wouldn't look her in the eye. "There's been some restructuring. We've had some complaints. Said you interrupted a client meeting?" Janet blinked. "I was just returning a lunch." "Look, this isn't personal, all right? But corporate flagged it. Said it was disruptive behavior." There was a pause, then he handed her a sealed envelope. Inside, a formal termination notice. Reason? Breach of access protocol. That night, Janet sat at her kitchen table in silence. Bills stacked like judgment beside her. Her daughter Maya coughed from the next room, soft, rhythmic, like it had been all week. Janet didn't cry. She just stared at the envelope, then at the ceiling, then at the numbers she still remembered from the board. It wasn't just an input error. It was a breakpoint. If the model used that data, the algorithm wouldn't predict failure, it would cause it. She knew it like she knew her own reflection. And they laughed. They kicked her out. They took away her badge, but they didn't erase what she knew. The next morning, she showed up again. Different clothes, no uniform. She walked past the receptionist, who didn't recognize her. Took the stairs this time. 24 floors. She stopped outside the same glass door. Inside, the same executives, same CEO, new projections on the screen. Still wrong. She waited for a pause in the meeting, then knocked. One of the VPs turned, eyes wide. Are you kidding me? Another. Someone call security. But before they could move, Janet opened the door and walked in. No sandwich, no mop, just her voice. I know I don't belong here, but you need to fix your formula before you spend another dollar. I can show you exactly where it breaks. Gasps. Phones lifted again. Pictures. A low murmur. The CEO stood up slowly, eyes fixed on her, studying her. You think you see something my engineers missed? Janet nodded. Yes? You realize how insane that sounds? Yes, she said, steady now. But it doesn't mean I'm wrong. In the back of the room, someone whispered, She was fired yesterday. What does she want now? Apology? Money? I think she's just angry. Maybe she was, but not the kind of anger they understood. She was tired of watching people pretend the world made sense just because they had suits and slide decks. She was tired of being invisible until she made someone uncomfortable. She didn't want credit. She wanted truth. And she was going to write it on that whiteboard, even if they erased it again. FOMO insert. Everything's building up to this moment. What happens next isn't just unexpected. It might change lives. Stick around. No one moved. Janet stood at the edge of the conference room, like a question no one wanted to answer. The CEO's eyes stayed locked on hers, unreadable. Then she sat back down slowly, almost like she wanted to see how far Janet would go. The others weren't as curious. One VP, tall with bright teeth and a perfect pocket square, leaned over to whisper, This is a waste of everyone's time. Another laughed, trying to keep it polite. But Janet didn't flinch this time. She took 2 slow steps toward the whiteboard, felt the heat of 20 disbelieving stares behind her, took the eraser, paused, and wiped away the red-circled phrase at the center. No viable fix. Gasps. Someone stood up. This is completely unacceptable. But the CEO held up her hand. Letter. A few people exchanged glances. What's the harm, right? Let the janitor scribble her little point. Let the audience applaud when she's proven wrong. Let the spectacle burn itself out. Janet picked up a black marker. A fresh one this time. She took a breath. Then began writing. Fast, confident, clean. Not the kind of writing you see from someone who mops floors. The kind of writing that comes from someone who used to teach undergrads. Someone who used to build the models these executives now blindly trust. In 5 minutes, the board was full again, but it didn't look the same. No flashy buzzwords, no arrows looping around nothing. Just a stripped-down model. Clean logic, inputs and outputs. A highlighted block of misclassified sensor data, and its cascading effect through every projection. She stepped back. Your system isn't failing because of bad luck, she said. It's failing because you're solving the wrong problem. One man stood up again, flustered. This is absurd. You don't have the full context? Neither did you, Janet cut in. You trusted an automated data feed without human verification. You didn't even check the April logs. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Because she was right. She wasn't guessing. She knew. A few chairs shifted. Someone leaned forward. Another pulled out their phone to take a photo, not mockingly this time, but like they wanted to study it later. Then came the question, how do you know this? From the CEO. Soft, not mocking, just direct. And for a moment, Janet didn't answer. Then she turned around. I was one of the engineers who built the first predictive module 5 years ago. My name was on the early internal memos before they replaced our division with contract analysts. I left the field to care for my daughter full-time. Took this job to keep us fed. No one spoke. I've cleaned this building every night for 8 years, and every night I watch people chase the same mistakes in better suits. A few jaws clenched. A few people shifted again, not out of disbelief but discomfort. Because now they couldn't laugh. Now she wasn't just a stranger with a marker, she was a witness. And her math made too much sense. The CEO stood up again, walked over to the board, read every line carefully, then turned to the others. Can anyone here explain why this isn't valid? No one answered. She looked at the VP with the pocket square. He cleared his throat, sat down. The room was quiet. Then the CEO turned back to Janet. What's your name? Janet McAllister. You said the error cascades through the entire model? Yes. If we'd launched this system with the current data feed, what would have happened? Janet didn't hesitate. Failure, public, expensive, and entirely avoidable. Silence again. Then the CEO nodded once. You can go. Just that. No thank you. No apology. Just dismissal. Again. Janet stared at her for a second, then nodded back. Good luck. She left the marker on the tray and walked out without looking back. She was halfway down the stairs when Melissa, yes, Melissa, the same assistant, ran after her. Hey, Janet! Janet turned. Melissa looked out of breath, wide-eyed. They just stopped the launch meeting, canceled the rollout. The CEO told the CTO to recheck all the sensor data from the last year. Janet raised an eyebrow. Did she mention me? Melissa shook her head. No, but everyone knows. Pause. Thank you for the sandwich and that. Janet smiled softly. You're welcome. That night, Janet didn't go straight home. She picked up her daughter early from her neighbor's apartment. They stopped for pizza. Then they sat in the park, just the two of them, under a cheap wool blanket, watching ducks and stars and streetlights flickering on. Maya leaned her head on Janet's shoulder. Did you have a good day at work? Janet laughed once. Yeah, baby, I really did. The call came the next morning. Janet was making oatmeal, stirring slowly, watching steam curl above the pot. Maya was still asleep, curled under her favorite yellow blanket. The phone vibrated once on the counter. Unknown caller. She hesitated, let it ring once more, then picked it up. Janet McAllister? Yes. This is Elizabeth Shaw, CEO of Kepler Systems. Janet didn't say anything. The name alone carried enough weight to make her grip the counter a little tighter. I'd like to meet with you, privately, today, if possible. Janet blinked. I'm not interested in interviews. This isn't an interview. Pause. I just want to ask you one question, in person. The office was emptier this time. No board members, no security guards with lifted palms, just silence and the quiet sound of rubber soles on corporate carpet. Janet wore the same coat she'd worn for 5 winters, stitched at the sleeve, fraying at the hem. She didn't care. The receptionist didn't ask questions, just waved her through. The elevator opened to the executive floor. The doors whispered closed behind her. Inside the corner office, Elizabeth Shaw stood alone, pouring tea into a ceramic mug. Tall, severe, graceful in that precise corporate way. Every movement careful, calculated. She didn't smile. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Janet sat. Silence, then, why didn't you just leave? Janet blinked. Excuse me? You were fired. You were humiliated. You had every reason to never step foot in this building again, but you came back. A pause. Then Elizabeth leaned forward, elbows on the desk. Why? Janet didn't answer immediately. She looked out the window where cranes cut across the skyline like needles in blue fabric. Then she turned back. Because I couldn't unsee it. Elizabeth waited. When you've spent years working on something, when you know the bones of it, the rhythm, it doesn't just disappear. I knew something was wrong. I couldn't not act, even if it meant walking into a room where I wasn't welcome. A long pause. Elizabeth sat back. You were one of the engineers on the predictive team? Janet nodded. Then why weren't you listed in the archival records? Because I left before they finalized the team. My name was in early white papers. And then I disappeared. Why? This time, Janet didn't hesitate. My daughter got sick. I didn't have paid leave. I chose her. Elizabeth's jaw tightened just slightly. And no one helped? Not even HR returned my emails. Silence again. Only this time it was different. Less cold. More heavy. Elizabeth stood, walked to the window, mug in hand. She didn't speak for a long time. Then she turned around. You embarrassed a boardroom full of executives. I told the truth. You did, and now they're all scrambling. She walked back to her desk. I'm not here to offer you a job, Janet. Good. That made Elizabeth smile, just a flicker, fast and dry. I'm here to ask if you'd consult with me, quietly, on strategy. Not on data models, on people, on what we keep missing. Janet leaned forward, eyebrows raised. You want advice from a janitor? I want advice from someone who sees the cracks before they become headlines. You said something yesterday that stuck with me. Elizabeth opened her drawer, pulled out a notepad. On it, scrawled in black ink, you're solving the wrong problem. We have the tech, we have the numbers, but we don't see the truth. I want to change that. Janet exhaled slowly, then leaned back. She didn't give an answer that day. She said she'd think about it. Elizabeth respected that. They shook hands, just once, firm and simple, and Janet left. Back through the lobby, back down the cold elevator, back to the real world. Later that week, a memo leaked. An internal review. The board had approved a restructuring of the predictive division. Not layoffs, not punishment, reinvention. With a new core principle, every voice matters, especially the ones no one hears. Some called it PR spin, others called it panic. But inside the company, something shifted. Managers started sitting in on technician reviews. Assistants got invites to meetings they used to only schedule. Janet's name was never on the press release. But in the hallway outside the CEO's office, one whiteboard remained unwashed, still standing, still showing the lines she drew. At home, Janet sat with Maya at the kitchen table. They were building a volcano for school, baking soda, vinegar, paint. Maya giggled as foam spilled over the cardboard. Mom, are you a scientist again? Janet paused, then smiled. Not yet, baby. But soon? Janet kissed her on the forehead. Maybe sooner than they think. The whiteboard was still there. Third floor, breakout conference room, no meetings scheduled, no foot traffic, no fancy titles on the door. Just a rectangle of glass walls, 2 chairs, and one board filled edge to edge with a series of equations written in thick, permanent marker. Except it wasn't permanent. Not technically. It could have been wiped clean with 2 swipes and a rag, but no one touched it. Not even the night crew. Because someone told them, leave it. That's history. And they listened. A week after the meeting with Elizabeth Shaw, Janet returned to the building. Not as a janitor, not as an employee. As something else. She had no title. She had no department. She was just there. And people started noticing. At first it was whispers in the hallway. That's her. That's the one from the meeting. Then it was a nod in the elevator. Then a seat at the lunch table. Then, finally, an email. Blasted to the company, in which Elizabeth Shaw introduced an external advisor helping us rethink operational flow from the inside out. No photo, no bio, just a single line. She sees what we've been trained to ignore. Janet didn't ask for that. She didn't want it. But she used it. She started sitting in on meetings, not to correct formulas, but to ask questions. Real ones. Like, who wasn't in the room when you built this? Did anyone run this plan by the people who'd actually use it? How much of this is data and how much is denial? At first, the responses were stiff, defensive, but over time, something cracked. And in the place of rehearsed answers came real conversations. Not every time, but enough. One Tuesday afternoon during a product redesign meeting, Janet sat across from a young intern who was sketching ideas for a user dashboard. Janet pointed to a button on the screen. Why is that labeled Intelligent Overdrive? The intern shrugged. Marketing said it sounded sexy. What does it do? It auto-adjusts speed under pressure conditions. Janet raised an eyebrow. And who's going to be using this? Field techs, mostly in high-stress outdoor environments. She paused. Then name it something that makes sense, something real. The intern blinked, then erased the label, wrote, Auto-stabilize mode. Simple, accurate, respectful. That same day, Janet passed the janitorial break room. Someone had pinned a photo of her to the corkboard. A candid, blurry image. Her standing in front of the whiteboard, mid-sentence, eyes sharp. Under it, someone had scribbled, She walked in with nothing, left with the whole room listening. Janet smiled. Didn't say a word, just walked on. But not everyone was listening. Some executives resented her presence. They called it a publicity stunt. They said she was being used. They questioned her qualifications. One even sent an anonymous complaint to HR asking, "What precedent does this set? Taking advice from a cleaning lady over experienced leadership." The CEO saw the message. She didn't respond in email. She responded in the next quarterly meeting. "We don't take advice from titles. We take it from truth." Then she walked to the board, picked up the marker, and wrote one sentence. Everyone laughed at her idea until we realized she was the only one who saw the problem. Janet didn't stay forever. After 3 months, she stepped away. She didn't want a desk. She didn't want a spotlight. She wanted peace. She wanted time with Maya. She wanted space to think and to teach again, maybe. She left quietly. No goodbyes. Just one final walk through the building she used to mop with calloused hands. And on her way out, she stopped by that old whiteboard. It was still untouched. But now a small plaque had been drilled into the wall beside it. The marker stays. In honor of those who dare to speak when the room isn't listening. At home, Janet unpacked a cardboard box she'd been meaning to open for years. Inside, dusty notebooks, printouts of code, annotated design sheets from her days in engineering. She flipped through them slowly, paused on one note scribbled in the corner of a page. A quote from one of her professors, "Truth doesn't knock, it breaks in." She smiled, then put the papers back. Maya walked into the room wearing oversized goggles and holding a paper model. "Mom, I made a prototype. Can you test it with me?" Janet stood up, arms open. "Always." Ending note. If you made it here, thank you. This story wasn't about heroics, it wasn't about formulas. It was about being heard when the world wants you silent. Drop a comment if you've ever been overlooked for speaking truth. And hit subscribe if you believe stories like Janet's deserve to be told. We're just getting started.